Chapter 38, A Wonderful Break. Pelican Bay Gang Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Robert Marquez said Rene Enriquez was above and beyond the majority of MN members at Pelican Bay. He had a level of sophistication that made it almost impossible to nail down everything he was doing. As I became more aware of MN, it was apparent he was among the top 5. I never thought he would leave the gang. And when he did, the news traveled quickly to the ranks of law enforcement in Southern California, sometimes referred to as the gang capital of America. Sergeant Richard Valdemar was still working with the FBI's Mexican Mafia Task Force in Los Angeles, and he immediately saw value in Rene Boxer Enriquez. He filed the paperwork that authorized a long-term trip to LA and a fresh MN debrief for the FBI. 2 deputies from the LA County Sheriff's Prison Gang Unit stood outside Rene's cell about 10 o'clock in the morning on July 24, 2002. The members of Valdemar's unit didn't really look all that much like cops. They could pass on the street as just regular Joes, and that's how they wanted it. Mike Duran, a mustached deputy with a Cuban ancestry, was one of them, an astute, efficient, good-natured, smart-aleck cop. Duran asked Rene, "Are you afraid of flying?" "I'm a mobster," answered Rene. "Would I be afraid of flying?" The deputy cracked up laughing as he slipped the waist chains around his prisoner for a plane ride to Los Angeles. "He's real nice," thought Rene. His partner was Deputy George Marin, a jolly, rotund Mexican-American with a heart of gold and a talent for writing warrants and other paperwork to prosecute mafia cases. "I love George," immediately said Rene. Deputies Duran and Marin would essentially be his caretakers for the next year. What he liked about them most was that they both treated him not like some murderous monster, but like a human being. The two of them had no shortage of good humor. There was a lot of laughter in their presence, and it was refreshing for a convict who had been locked down 24/7 for more than a decade with people who wanted him dead. A young FBI agent named Gled Hotima was also along for the ride. He was assigned to evaluate Rene's worth to the Bureau. Enriquez found him a bit standoffish. A turboprop 12-seater Beechcraft King airplane sat on the tarmac. It belonged to the LA County Sheriff's Department. Lieutenant Ernie Madrid and his CERT team sharpshooters from Pelican Bay State Prison, armed with automatic rifles, kept watch for any unwelcome intruders. As Rene boarded the aircraft, bound in leg chains, waist chains, and handcuffs, the pilot was wearing a flight suit and a shoulder holster with a 9mm Beretta. The lawman pilot warned, "If you do anything stupid, I will shoot you." "Okay," said Rene, "I'm not going to be any problem." 3.5 hours later, he could feel the airplane descending. He looked out the tiny airplane window and saw little reservoir lakes below and a landscape dotted with little swimming pools and backyards. I spotted the Queen Mary ocean liner permanently docked in Long Beach Harbor as a tourist attraction. The water in the port looked filthy. I stepped out of the plane at Long Beach Airport and the whole world changed. It was sunny and warm compared to the normally chilly, rainy, drizzly days at Pelican Bay. In sharp contrast to the echo dullness of a prison cell, there was the sound of noises from the city. Rene noticed that he could smell exhaust fumes. Even the odor seemed pleasant and real. I was overloading with environmental stimulation, with sounds and colors that had become only memories for him. His handlers walked him 10 feet to a waiting van. It was pitch black with curtains and dark windows, a surveillance van driven by a tall, serious, deep-voiced SSU agent named Dan Ivania, a prison gang expert with a couple master's degree and a work ethic that had no patience with laziness. They joined a fairly long caravan of law enforcement vehicles. No one would tell Rene where they were headed. "It's a scene out of the movies," thought Rene. He peeked through the window curtain and checked out all the cars on the freeway, spotting an expensive Ferrari. "That's a come fuck me car," he told the nonplussed FBI agent. Looking up from through the driver's window, he saw a sign for the 605 freeway and then the Cerritos Mall. "This is Cerritos," he noted out loud. "I used to live just down the street." It was mid-afternoon when the caravan pulled up to the rear entrance of a satellite sheriff's station, miles east of downtown Los Angeles. Even Ivania walked the prize mafia dropout to a holding cell, and Renee noticed the jailer looking at me like I'm an animal. No punk. Her name was Kelly Ford, and she knew from his reputation that Renee was considered dangerous. Yet, Renee said she was fair and turned out to be really nice. She stepped out of the room while her new prisoner was strip searched. Renee had a small cell block all by himself, except for one 10-day trip to Pelican Bay State Prison. It would be his new home for more than a year. On occasion, the jailers brought him home-cooked food, and in return, he made them origami mobiles. It was one of the skills he taught himself while passing time in prison. On that first day, the FBI's Hatima brought him cheeseburgers, fries, and a strawberry milkshake from a stellar Southern California fast food chain called In-N-Out. It had been 13 years since I'd eaten something like that, said Renee appreciatively, and it tasted so delicious. This time around, that was about all he was going to get from the FBI. Sergeant Valdemar brought Renee down mainly to see if the feds could do some cases with him. There were nearly a dozen meetings with assistant U.S. attorneys and FBI agents discussing the murder of Jimmy Character Palma on death row, Renee's Artesia crew, the LAPD Rampart Dirty Cop scandal, and the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang, and Daryl Baca's crew. In the end, Renee didn't get involved in any of these cases. Sergeant Valdemar later explained that the FBI just couldn't see the benefit in using Rene Enriquez, didn't see his value. Warden Joseph McGrath did see his value. On October 26, 2002, he sent a Learjet and a CERT team to pick up Rene and bring him back to Pelican Bay to be a witness for the state attorney general in a civil case filed by an inmate named Anthony Escalera versus Pelican Bay State Prison. Sureño prisoners had been on constant lockdown, not allowed out on the yard ever since the prison race riot in 2000. Escalera challenged the fact that only Sureños were on lockdown and filed the lawsuit to force the state to allow them all back out on the mainline yard. Before boarding the plane in Long Beach, Rene stood on the tarmac with more than a dozen cops and smoked a cigar. "It was an amazing thing for me," he exclaimed. "It was like, wow." 2 days later, there were snipers stationed on the roof of the Del Norte courthouse in Crescent City when he went to testify for the state. He recognized one of them, outfitted in full SWAT gear, as Rivers Drown, the young Christian correctional officer who had been so kind to him when he initially dropped out. Inside, Rene sat behind a screen in the packed courtroom, identified only as inmate number 25 and a recent mafia dropout. He testified about the relationship between Sureños, La M, and the riot. In the end, the trial judge, finding the lockdowns were unconstitutional, eventually ruled in favor of the Sureño inmates. In the meantime, the California Department of Corrections and Pelican Bay State Prison were involved in another bitter lawsuit that threatened to cost the state millions of dollars. It was called Castillo vs. Almeida. CDC Director Edward Almeida. Steve Smiley Castillo was a gregarious jailhouse lawyer with a big snaggletooth grin who had become part of PBSP folklore, filing lawsuits on behalf of the inmates. In 2002, Castillo vs. Terhune, Warden Cal Terhune, won 14 points of reform and redress regarding the SHU program. Castillo's prowess in prison law had endeared him to the Mexican mafia. Jaco Padilla, a friend of Castillo's, wanted to make him. He argued that the mafia needed intelligent members. Angel Valencia also sponsored Castillo for membership. Boxer and others vetoed the idea. Even though Castillo was doing time for a murder, Enriquez felt that he was a Poindexter type, not a worthy killer. Castillo's latest lawsuit had the potential impact of a bone crusher shank plunging into the bowels of the CDC. He was challenging the entire SHU system, claiming that it was capricious and cruel, and that the department had failed to follow up on reforms issued as the result of his previous legal action, Castillo vs. Terhune. If he won, prison gang members could be released back to the main yard. No more 23/7 in a solitary confinement cell. La M shot callers knew what that meant. More freedom to personally control prison rackets on a day-to-day basis, to communicate face-to-face, deal drugs, and to kill whoever they wanted, when they wanted, with their usual impunity. Castillo was onto something big. Moreover, Castillo had the support of some powerful former and current state legislators, including Senator Gloria Romero, Chair of the Senate Select Committee of the California Correctional System, Senator John Vasconcelos, former chair of the Public Safety Committee, who, according to his website, stopped cold the decade-long rush to more penalties and more prisons, former two-term Senator Richard Polanco, once chair of the Senate Prison Committee, who championed Castillo versus Terhune, and former Senator Tom Hayden, 1960s radical and ex-husband of controversial movie actress Jane Fonda, who saw himself as something of a gang expert, having written a book published in 2004 titled Street Wars: Gangs and the Future of Violence. Tony Raphael, who in July 2007 published an insightful book called The Mexican Mafia, described Senator Hayden's work as a profoundly muddled and often dishonest examination of Southern California and national gang culture. During his debrief, Rene Enriquez had described the Mafia's interest in using politicians Romero, Polanco, Hayden, and Vasconcelos to further Laime's goals. It worked quite simply. One of our objectives is to infiltrate legitimate politicians, explained Rene, if not by overly corrupting them, through subtle corruption by having our voices in place. Romero, Polanco, Hayden, and Vasconcelos listened to Steve Castillo, and Stephen Castillo listened to Laime. That said, one Mafia goal was to shut down the shoot. Rene expounded on Romero's reputed ties to Steve Castillo and Castillo's strong relationship with Laime's Jaco Padilla. During the 2000 peace talks that followed the Pelican Bay riot and a couple of subsequent inmate hunger strikes organized by Castillo, the mob didn't miss the significance of politicians who came to see them, sent their aides to follow up, and join their causes. They could be used to the benefit of Laime, explained Rene. During this trip to Pelican Bay State Prison, Lieutenant Madrid set up a meeting for him and Rene to meet with Jaco Padilla. Enriquez felt that his old friend was also tired of MA politics, and he talked to him about dropping out. If Jaco turned and testified in the lawsuit, it would neutralize Stephen Castillo and his bogus arguments to shut down the SHOOT program. Padilla was mildly receptive but nervous. The next day, Rene met with the warden and 3 top CDC administrators who were eager to shop for a prosecution team and launch a massive MA investigation. On November 5, 2002, Madrid and some of his CERT officers drove Rene back to his new jail quarters at the Los Angeles area sheriff's substation. He was excited about his expanding role as a quasi-gang consultant for law enforcement. A week later, at the request of the director of the Department of Corrections, he did another hour-long video, again spelling out the operations and insidious intents of the Mexican Mafia. The in-depth interview was done by Lieutenant Madrid as Agent Evania listened in. This presentation was headed to the state's #1 executive, Governor Gray Davis. On Thanksgiving Day, Detective George Marin arrived with his daughter, son, and niece, carrying a platter overflowing with home-cooked holiday turkey and other trimmings. It showed me cops were humans, said Rene. On another occasion, Marin's wife cooked him breakfast, and his teenage daughter sent audio tapes with religious messages. She wrote, "I'm praying for you. Jesus loves you." I was so touched, said Rene. In a January 3, 2003 meeting with Assistant CDC Director Brian Perry and Agent Dan Evania, Rene Enriquez agreed to help the Special Services Unit in its prosecution of Laime. On February 3rd, Sergeant Valdemar, frustrated by the Fed's lack of interest, decided to explore the possibility of bringing in state indictments with the help of Rene. To interview him, Valdemar brought in his favorite deputy district attorney, Anthony Manzella, who, as a young prosecutor 30 years earlier, helped put serial killer Charlie Manson away forever. Manzella put crooks in jail for 10 years and then became an LA-based litigation partner in a New York law firm for 17 years. Having made enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life, he decided to join the district attorney's staff to end his career putting bad guys away, the real bad guys. He'd done a number of dangerous Mexican Mafia cases. One of them put Luis Pelon Maciel, the mastermind of the Maxim Road murders, on death row. Manzella felt that Rene was smart, but there was a problem. "I wanted to keep working with him," Rene Enriquez said Manzella, "but under California law, it was years too late to make any kind of deal to reduce or vacate Enrique's 20 to life prison sentence. Then, an understaffed sheriff's homicide bureau decided that they didn't want any part of it. District Attorney's investigators felt the same way. A frustrated Sergeant Valdemar was also eventually pulled off the case. Manzella couldn't do it all alone. During the first quarter of 2003, Renee did a training video about the mafia for an LAPD task force and another for the U.S. Bureau of Prisons. Different local detectives trickled in to talk to him about a handful of MA-related murders, and he offered information that helped them build their cases. That was it. 14 months in LA was a wonderful break for the drudgery of Shu living in Pelican Bay State Prison, but no big cases came out of it for Renee, and no deals from the feds or the local cops. He headed back to prison.